Record. Oh, good. Good to hear
All
that.
right.
All right, we're on. We're live. All right. Well, we haven't met for a few weeks, so um, we're in we're in our study of the Gospel of John. We're going to continue with chapter 7. Look at two verses, 37, 39. But I thought it'd be good to, of course, review where we've been. And my whole way of understanding the Gospels now at this stage of life is depicted over and over again by this diagram. And this diagram depicts the crosshairs here in the center as Jesus's perception of things governed out of his relationship with his Father. I and the Father are one. And the tensions that we are seeing within the gospel account is graphically illustrated. I think I got it here somewhere, by various levels of perception, where the crosshairs, these crosshairs are now on the outside, and there is the process of transformation, as I am trying to illustrate it, is a movement from here to here in the center. And there are these barriers that we've been talking about. In this story that we've been looking at are the official rulers, the Jewish leaders, those governing the activities at the great and mighty temple, of which we'll be looking at here in just a few minutes. They are operating out of a layer one, what I call primal layer one self-protect position. They view Jesus as a threat to their comfort and their safety and their power and their place. And so therefore they're functioning clear out here on the edge, and they have a long ways to go. They got a lot of dying to do in order to really understand where Jesus is coming from. They're exercising their resources, which would be the temple police, and their mode of operation here is, let's seize him, let's control him, let's snuff out this message. And because of this collective state of being, it's absolutely impossible for them to comprehend, let alone receive, what Jesus is offering. And guys, this is my way of describing and understanding and describing the tension that we see through the gospel accounts. Jesus and the religious leaders. Jesus, and as he's interacting with all people, this is the framework by which I'm attempting to understand what I am learning. So, of course, sharing it with you all. So that's where we're at. And then in the midst, yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention the occasion of this text, John 7, is the Feast of Booths. The Feast of Booths. There's another name for it. I can't think of it. But everybody's in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is absolutely buzzing. This is the great fall festival. And it says on the last day of the great feast, because it actually transpired over several days. And there's some reading commentaries, there's all kinds of discussion about these details that we won't go into, but which day was it? I have no idea, but it doesn't really matter. On the great day of the feast, the culminating events here, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. The one who believes in me, as the scripture says, from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water." Got a bit of a cold here, fellas, so bear with me. Verse 39, but this he said in reference to the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were to receive, for the Spirit was not yet given because Jesus was not yet glorified. So here's the text we're going to be looking at today. Verse 37, it says, now on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me. This photograph here is of the model city that is on the grounds of the Holy Land Hotel, just on the outside east hill of Jerusalem. And that, if you were to walk by that, those walls around that Temple Mount area there, which is, this area right here, is about knee high. So it puts it into scale. And they've actually got an entire city built on about a third of an acre it covers, that is both geographically accurate and to scale of what the New Testament Jerusalem could have looked like. So this is the Temple Mount proper. And this would be the east gate right here. That faces east. Right here in the south is where people would enter. There were two entrances that, the one on the right is the entrance, and then right here is where people would exit. And you actually had to go up quite a few stairs or a ramp or whatever they had in order to get up onto this temple plaza. Here and here is the court of the Gentiles. That's where my understanding is that they could have, that's where the money changers would have been, and where they have people who do commerce, selling trinkets and whatever they do. I don't know, holy water. I don't know, but that's where this would all take place. And you see that barrier right there. That would be, that would be off limits beyond that to Gentiles. And then once you get into this structure right here, this area right here was divided into two areas: the court of the men and the court of the women. And it's probably that's where Jesus probably was when he was crying out in the temple. But this place was full of people. And what I'd ask you to do here is just picture Jerusalem filled with people, all camping throughout the city, setting up their tents. Real festive occasion, and they set up these tents in commemoration of God's deliverance from Egypt and his daily care in the wilderness. So this was a big camping experience in Jerusalem. Thousands of people present, and the daily activities in the temple would all be indicative and commemorative of God's care, God's deliverance from Egypt. And also I think also indirectly it's in the fall, which would be the time of fruitfulness. And so it has the idea of fruitfulness, provision, care, and deliverance all tied up into one massive big event here. So that's kind of what it looked like. Anybody ever seen this? You guys been to Jerusalem?
No, that's really cool.
Yeah.
How big is the big temple in terms of, is it an acre? Is it 2 acres?
You mean where the Temple Mount is?
No, that whole diagram of the outer wall and the inner. I mean.
Oh, you mean the model? How big is the model?
Well, how big does the model represent?
Well, Jerusalem would be. I'll show you a map in a minute.
Okay.
I'll answer that in just a minute.
Yep.
Now here's another computer-generated model, and notice there's some slight variations here, but I pulled this off the internet because it shows in scale, what the plaza would have looked like, what it would have been like being around the temple. I mean, this is amazing. And this is Herod's temple. This is what Herod the Great built for the people. On the same, he did a massive remodel in the 1st century BC, into the time of Jesus, of the second temple that was built by Ezra, in the times of Ezra and Nehemiah. So this was state of the art, absolutely beautiful. It was, one of the wonders of the world kind of place. And, and, much of it is left. You go around, you can rumble around the ruins and you can see leftovers of Herod's work here. But in the midst of all this, Jesus cries out, and probably in this courtyard here, the court of men, this model depicts the court of women on the upper portion, like a balcony. I don't know if that was it or not. I don't know if anybody knows. But in this area here is where Jesus, I think, where he cried out, if anyone is thirsty, come to me and drink. So sometime during the culminating ceremonies, Jesus cries out with those words. And what I want to look at this morning is, why these words, why at this time, and why now? So that's what we're going to look at. So John, here's a map, and there is no scale here, but my guess, this is north here. And my guess from here to here is close to a mile. Less than a mile. And I would say from here to here is right around a mile. You can walk the walls, which this depicts what's there today. Does it? Yep. Pretty much that's what's there today. You can walk that in, casually in a half a day, easy, maybe 2-3 hours if you're really hoofing it. But what I want to get to here is that water. Talk about water here. Water is a major utility required by the Temple Mount, because they not only have ceremonial of the cleansing, the mikvah, the ceremonial tubs, but they also have, when they're sacrificing animals, it's messy and you got a lot of cleanup to do. So water is huge. The disadvantage is the temple is the highest geographic location in the whole area, and water does not run uphill. So they had to devise ways to get water, large quantities of water, to the Temple Mount area. And that was no easy task. And there are lots of theories and a lot of ruins and stuff left over. And this is where archaeology comes into play. But but they had to bring water to this by the time Herod's temple was built, he had it figured out. He had a complex network of water transport and storage. They had cisterns. They would gather water at occasion, during torrential rain, and they would store it underground. And there's several caverns you can go and see, but how it all interrelated at this point in history, I'm not absolutely clear. But this is not flat. North, the grade of the fall runs this way. This is by far the hardest section of the wall to defend, the northern wall. There are 3 valleys: the Kidron, which runs right down through here, the Gehenna, which comes right down through here, and then there's a smaller valley that bisects the city called the Tyropian, and it comes down through here. So the city of Jerusalem is on 2 hills. The Temple Mount is the higher of the 2 hills, and the slope is in this direction, and this goes off to the east, which would be the Dead Sea. So water was a big deal. but uh, water, my point in all this is that water was so needed, and water was in plain view. People in the temple would have been cognizant of the presence of water in the temple. Water. That's what I want you to remember. So there are at least two deeply embedded Old Testament references that had bearing on this occasion. Now, you got to remember that the people attending this New Testament, this period in history, would have been very versed on what we call the Old Testament. It was they called it the scriptures. And they would have been very well versed into that. And some of what I'll be sharing this morning could have very well been quoted during this festival occasion. So we're going to look at two scriptures this morning from the Old Testament. The first one that has bearing on this occasion is Exodus 17, 1-6, where Moses smites the rock. So could one of you read this? Because before you read it, one of you get ready to read it. But remember, this festival is about the time of Moses, the time in the wilderness, the time of provision. And that all has bearing on this text. So could somebody read this on the screen?
Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. So the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water so that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why is it that you have brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What am I to do with this people? A little more and they will stone me." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand your staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel.
Thanks, Tatsi. So, okay, so here we have a story that took place during the time of the Exodus. God has amazingly delivered them from Egypt through a miracle, the parting of the Red Sea, and Moses's staff involved. And now they're out in the wilderness and they're complaining. They're falling apart. The wheels are falling off of the cart because they have no water. Understandably so. Water's a big deal. And so they do what people do, what we all do. They start complaining and they start blaming. And they say, "Moses, here you did. You brought us out in the wilderness. Did you bring us out here to die?" So it's what human nature does. Again, reverting back into the layer one, we see it right here with the folks, is that they are only concerned about their self survival. They've lost all perspective in the reality of God's care and provision, because they cannot see that at this point. And so Moses seeks God, which is a great idea. And God says, "Okay, let's have an object lesson here, and take your staff," which represented God's delivering agent, the staff, "and now take that same staff and go hit a rock." The rock is the last thing you would do in order to find water, or hitting a rock. But God uses a an atypical means so out in left field to demonstrate to the people his enduring care for them. All they need to do is seek him, and and he will provide. So that's the gist of this story. And that story would have been on their minds and could have been very much a part of this occasion as they were commemorating God's amazing care in the wilderness. So Jesus cries out, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And then what I've got down here is, this is a clear declaration to all that God's amazing provision is present before their eyes, right there, right now, and available to all, regardless of individual circumstances. So Jesus takes this Old Testament story and transposes it to this occasion taking place at this time on this temple plaza of God's provision of the water, with water all in sight. He's saying, if anyone is thirsty, come to me and drink. Okay, so that's number one. Now we move on. We move on to verse 38. The one who believes in me, as the scripture said, from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water. This is the second portion of his declaration. And what I'd like to do is correlate the story in Ezekiel 47, where the prophet Ezekiel has a vision of this very place, this temple, and what it has to do with water. So this is smaller text. Could somebody read this story out of Ezekiel 47?
And he brought me back to the door of the house, and behold, water was flowing from under the threshold of the house toward the east, for the house faced east. And the water was flowing down from the right side of the house, from south of the altar. And he brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around on the outside of the outer gate by the way of facing east. And behold, water was spurting out from the south side. When the man went out toward the east with a line in his hand, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he led me through the water reaching the ankles. Again, he measured 1,000 and led me through the water reaching the knees. And he measured 1,000 and led me through the water reaching the hips. Again, he measured 1,000. It was a river that I could not wade across because the water had risen enough water to swim in, a river that could not be crossed by wading. And he said to me, Son of man, have you seen this? Then he brought me back to the bank of the river. Now, when I had returned, behold, at the bank of the river, there were very many trees on the one side of the other. Then he said to me, these waters go out toward the eastern region and go down into become fresh. And it will come about that every living creature which swarms in every place where the river goes will live. And there will be very many fish. And these waters go there, and the others will stand beside it from En-Gedi to Englaim. There will be a place for the spreading of nets. Their fish will be according to their kinds, like the fish of the great sea, very many. But its swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. And by the river on its bank, on one side and on the other, will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. They will bear fruit every month because their water flows from the sanctuary and their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing.
All right. Thanks, Vince. Guys, I could spend a month on this, but we're not going to. I mean, this is so exciting to me. So I'm going to ask you a question. What, as you read this, this is a prophetic vision. The prophet Ezekiel is being directed by some angelic being. He's being called Son of Man here. What is the big idea, the 30,000 foot view of what you're seeing here? Any ideas?
God's provision.
Yeah. Okay. Bingo. God's provision. Let's start there. And what do we see about God's provision?
Well, it's not only the provision of water, but the provision of, it looks like food in terms of the fish and so forth. So, and then also the growth of vegetation, for trees for food and so forth. So it's, the provision of not only water, but also the provision of food.
It's what the effect of water and the basic natural soils and chemical, soils and makeup, and it's creating life, Tatsi. Exactly correct. So there's provision and there is outcome, which is abundance of fruit and vegetation and life. One other thing to add is that this provision works from small, relatively small, to relatively great. As it's moving away from the Temple Mount, this river is becoming deeper, wider, and larger. Now, let's go back here. I just had this thought. Let's go back to here. And Ezekiel's vision is happening in the temple right here. I don't want to do that. Yeah, I want to use this. No, I don't want to do this. I want to go this way. Here we go. So the vision is happening right here in this Temple Mount. And there is a small trickle of water that's flowing out. And I believe it says it's flowing out the south, which would make sense because this is the lowest portion. Remember, the Kidron Valley comes down here, the Gehenna Valley comes out here, the Tyropian comes out here, and everything coalesces right here and moves out east to the Dead Sea. I mean, there's a drop off here. I think it's like 3,000 feet between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea, and it's like 15 miles. So it is a drop. You're going down. And so this water is trickling out. The angelic being, whoever it is, takes him out of the north gate, has him come around on the east, and then he sees the water right here, and it's coming out. And he takes this measuring line, and he goes out 1,000 cubits, probably about 3,000 feet. And no, 1,000 cubits, probably 1,800 feet. I'm thinking of yards, not cubit. Cubits about 18 inches, 16 inches. So he goes out 15, just say 1,500 feet. And he puts a stake, puts a rod there, and the water's ankle deep. Then he goes another 1,000 or 1,500, and it's what he says knee deep, and then thigh deep, and then he gets out so far he can't even cross it. It's this idea of a trickle beginning here that has abundance of life And by the time it reaches its destination, quote, the Dead Sea, where there is no life, it is giving life to that which had no life. And there are fish, and they're fisherman's net, and they give the geographic Engedi to Ingalem. And, that's a distance there that, wow, this place is now this place of abundant life. And if you were to go there today, it's pretty dead. Dead Sea, I've camped on the Dead Sea, and it's a miserable experience. So getting back to where we were here, or let's move on to the next. The second reference where Jesus says, part two, come to me and drink, part one, and the promise that if we just drink from him, the promise is that out of our bellies, innermost being, will flow rivers of living water to all who come to him and drink. Jesus reframes this familiar Old Testament passage, and he transposes this message, and he brings it right to the present, here and now, at this very place. A promise. Note, there is no direct Old Testament quote. You won't find it. Although Jesus says there is, the scripture says. This gives us insight into how Jesus and or John, whether this is Jesus's words or John's words under the inspiration of the Spirit, I understand that, but it's how they viewed and interpreted the Old Testament. They would say, as the scriptures said, but in this case, there is no direct quote, but there is a spirit of which there's an overall idea as depicted in Ezekiel and other Old Testament scriptures about, I'm thinking of what Psalm, blessed is the man, he shall be like a tree of life planted along the river. very poor reference there, but there are several Old Testament ideas of water and life and abundance. And I think the way the writers of the New Testament, and possibly that Jesus, if this is an actual quote, this is how they cited things. They weren't looking for chapter and verse. They were looking for the intent and the bigger idea, and they would take that idea and they would transpose it and bring it in to the very, very moment that this is what God is doing right now. And that's the language by which Jesus is talking. Now, in verse 39, Jesus, or in my view of verse 39, John now provides clarification to his first century readers. No doubt that after the death and resurrection of Christ, there was a lot of questions on what the Spirit is all about. What now that Christ is physically gone, what do we do with this? And what do we do with this idea of spirit? And here, I believe John inserts verse 39 as a direct help to his first century readers to help clarify what is going on here of the Spirit being that one who will move and bring about abundance and life. We can also correlate Isaiah 12, 3-5 to what's going on. Here's a quote: "Therefore, you will joyously draw water from the springs of salvation." This is prophetic. That spring of salvation is the Christ. And on that day, you will say, "Give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, make known his deeds among the peoples, make them remember that his name is exalted. Praise the Lord in song, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known throughout the earth." That's just I just thought of Isaiah 12 there. There's many Old Testament reference that would have bearing here. So today we've examined Jesus's emotion-packed declaration at this festive occasion. We've looked at it from a large perspective and 2,000 years removed from this occasion. His cry is serving as a prophetic fulfillment and also an invitation towards a new and refreshing kind of life. He is actually physically calling the people to come to him. Come to me. If you're thirsty, don't come, don't do as they did with Moses. Come to me and you will be satisfied. In addition, he's coupling the promise of what can be through a life that comes to him. And that coming to him, he's using the term to drink. If we just come to him, he's providing the promise. And that promise is, out of his innermost being will flow rivers of living water, of life-giving water. In this sense, Jesus is bringing together the past and the future at this very moment in time. So for you and I, we've got 20 minutes. From what degree, to what degree can you relate right now today? Because Jesus is speaking to them at the moment today. And so what does this mean to us today? How can we relate to his promise from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water? What does that mean to you and me? And then what does this new flowing, refreshing life look like through you? So that's the question. There's only 4 of us here. So we are the table. Let's do table time here. But guys, I'm excited to hear what do you think about this? You and I look at ourselves, we go, gee, what, there must be a valve somewhere that's shut. I don't know. But let's talk about it, about rivers of flowing water, the promise of that through you and me.
So Mike, I just, I really like this. Revelation the book ends like just a couple of verses from the end, right?
Yeah, tell it. Yeah.
16, it says, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things for the churches. I'm the root and the offspring of David, the bright and morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, come. Let the one who hears say, come. And let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who wishes to take the water of life without cost. And that reminds me of the Isaiah 55 one too, right? Where he says, come to me. I'm going to find that too as well. I got it right here. So Isaiah 55 says, "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come buy, eat. Come buy wine and milk without money, without cost. Why do you spend your money for what is not bread and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good and delight yourself in abundance. Incline your ear to me and come. Listen to me that you may live." And then I thought it was referencing the water too, but this idea of coming, right, is mind-boggling.
Oh, yeah. And, this isn't just something that's in one little section of the New Testament. John, what you testified to is, man, this is right at the end. this theme, it continues on, and it's right at the very end. Come to me and drink.
Yeah, how about his whole conversation with the woman at the well, right?
Exactly.
Right, in John 4.
Yep. Same deal. Yeah. So you and I have tasted of this water. We have drunk at this well. We have, all of us on this call have done that. And so the promise is that out of his being will flow rivers of living water. And I view that in a continual context. What does it look like, guys, in your life?
I have no idea. I mean, the only thing I could think of is the dynamic of it, living versus stagnant water. Something that's more agile, more equipped to be what you need me to be at the moment. Kind of when I read the Bible and the culture, try to read it in the culture that it's in. Excuse me. I think people were a lot more aware of thirsting and the importance of water than maybe Western contemporary man is. I go to my faucet or buy bottles of water, and I got it. Water is necessary, but it's not what it is if you're following Moses in the desert.
Yeah.
It's something that's a little more vital. And so I've always thought that the references to water that Jesus made and the Bible makes is a metaphor for life. That it's not really the liquid itself. It's what water represents to you. It's life. And so when you change the modifier on that, when you go from dead water to living water, then it's like, well, what kind of life do you got? Is it just this religious one step after the other dead life?
Yeah.
Following your days, or is it dynamic living life that's agile and able to do anything that needs to be? And I think of the stuff that God says, I'll be what you need me to be. I'm not limited to what your ancestors said I am. I am what I am today for you. And I think that brings a lot of hope. It does to me, brings a lot of hope. And so to never thirst again because I've drunk of the water, that Jesus talks about, makes me think of to need is to have some sort of recognition of lack. And so I feel like if I drink when I drink of the water, which is Jesus, the feeling of lack will be less and less. That I'll always be fully equipped. I'll always be ready. I'll always be in fellowship with, in concert with this unlimited supply of life.
So, okay, can I butt in there?
Sure.
Okay, you started out, you said, I have no idea. Appreciate your honesty. I'd like to, if we got time, I'd like to comment on that in regard to how we all think. But as you progress through, you articulated, Vince, very well, this idea of abundance being a less of lack idea. Do you feel, at least to some degree, that's at this age, that's true in your life, that today you have a less of a lack than you did 30 years ago in what really matters, in your sense of peace, in your sense of identity, and in your sense of relationship, and and solace at peace deep within your soul, where the life is about. Would you say that lack, would you call it, less of lack is truer today than it was 30 years ago?
I think so. And I think
Yeah.
it's in the absence of external markers, these little road signs that are in life that tell you, well, I've made it this far, so I've achieved, and now I've made it that far, now I've achieved more. And, how are you doing? Well, let me go check my inventory and show you. And, but when at some point in your life, at least in my life, it's come down to the solitary, or the fellowship of me and God. It's me and God, and the knowledge of that, and know that because of that union, I'm without lack. It's not because of what I've inventoried in my life, and it's not the possessions that I've stacked up in the corner of the house, and it's not these kinds of the normal road signs, the road markers that you can say, look what I've achieved. I don't really feel like I'm diminished in any way, except that I really can't give you a good reason for it. I can't come up with, I'm happy. Why? I don't know. I don't really know.
Well,
I just am.
I would, I know you as a friend. We all know you as a friend. And I look to you, Vince, and I say, this man is obviously got rivers of flowing water going through. You're a life giver. You're funny. There's no one like Vince Frisha. There's no one like him. And your twist on things, and your sarcastic kind of view of things, and self-demeaning kind of, it's funny and it's engaging, and that is how it looks like through you to me. I think it's real. You're not striving for the grandiose. You probably did at one time like the rest of us, but there is a life there. Now, when I ask a question like this, there was a long period of silence, is because I think we all tend to have this image in our head when it comes to religious persona, what I should be like. We all got this thing in our head that we've created of how a Christian man ought to be. And that's why we stumble around. That's why we can't answer it. And I put myself in this. I got to come up with a really good answer here. No, we don't. Gal, I think it's much more simpler and freer. At this stage of life, guys, we are much freer to express who we really are. And that's what I'm trying to say to you, Vince, is that, man, you're refreshing to all of us.
Well, thank you.
That's not BS. So
I'll be honest here. This has actually been enlightening to me, because in the places where I've witnessed, and I felt that I shared the gospel, and somebody really were impacted by it, or when they were impacted by it, I didn't think about it as giving living water. I was thinking of more directly of giving life. So I wasn't thinking of the analogy that he has here of water and life kind of a thing. So to me today, it has been an enlightenment. So that's something that I feel that has broadened my whole concept of what it is to receive Jesus and to share him with others.
Right. Huh. Let me tell you, thanks, Tassi. Let me tell you a quick story. I've got a growing compassion and concern for the emerging generation. And I get a lot of opportunity now, especially in the summer, to talk to these younger guys. And at this last camp, we had a very sharp young man who's borderline Christian, because he sees what we've done to it. He's a very astute young man, and this is true of many young men I talk to. And he had, during the course of this last camp, he had a major movement forward, because in his own words, he says, now I see how Christianity can impact a person's life. And afterwards, I went up to him and I said, Max, I said, wait, tell me a little bit more about this. And he says, he didn't talk about doctrinal nuances and things like that. He says, I have never seen grown men cry. That's what he said to me. And somehow that, along others within the context of true honesty, transparency, vulnerability, and looking at Jesus, somehow has convinced him. He says, now I see how. I loved it. Because that Jesus is talking about how. I think we got misconceptions in our heads, including me, of how it ought to look, what it's supposed to look like. And the older I get, the more I interact with people. No, we just need to be who we are. And that's a beautiful thing, Vince.
So Mike, I think on our faith journey, we read this and we go, Jesus says, if any man is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And we would say that on our faith journey, it's about, let us go to Jesus and find the answers to life. Let us go to Jesus and make sure that we've got our doctrines and our theologies correct. And our faith journey is really about information. And so we bump into David and we read the Psalms and he says, no, taste and see that the Lord is good. And that does not compute, right? We go, read for information.
Yeah.
So, Jesus is a rabbi standing up and he says, no. He says, come to me and drink. And he who believes in me, as the scriptures say, will from his innermost being shall flow rivers of living water. And you go, what?
What?
Right? What
It's
in the
mind-boggling.
Which goes back to that woman at the well, right? And this idea of being thirsty. So everybody's thirsty, and we spend our whole life trying to figure out how to, quench that thirst. And our spiritual journey, this river that is there, can all of a sudden scripture becomes alive. It becomes something we actually taste, becomes experiential. I'm looking out the window, trees and green. We go back in the mountains and nature. And all of a sudden we begin to have ears that hear, and this life thing, it takes on so many different dimensions, let's say, or right? But it's through the person, through the spirit, that God, this idea of being born again, it's like being, all of a sudden it becomes a reality as opposed to information. And we could just go on and on with this, but
boy, John, I really appreciate those words. And we're gonna go, but to encapsulate, I think you were making a distinction between the idea of just coming to drink and exploring what that is versus dotting our I's and crossing our T's, getting it right. Those are two different arenas. And at least in my book, I don't see Jesus ever ever thus far saying, come to me and get it right. He says, come to me for life. Oh man, what a journey, guys. What an exploration. And at this stage of life, guys, we're so free. We're freed up. We're freed up to let go of some of these pre-constrained ideas that we've had about what it is to be anybody, to be a Christian. And to really, Lord, thank you for fresh eyes to see the loving life of Jesus. It's amazing. I love the terms, flowing, refreshing life. Wow. Well, fellas, we're going to go. We got to go.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
All righty.
Thanks
Thank you, Mike.
Yep. Thanks for
Yeah.
hanging in there. And if you
Yeah.
think about it, let's reach out to Dick and Dave. So have a good week, guys.
Will do.
Yep. See you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.